Welcome. This is DruVision IT Consulting. This is another in our series of IT Quick Bites, 5 minutes for IT concepts. So today's episode, we're going to talk about change management. And if there was one single part of IT that I wanted to get right, to be an expert in, it's change management. Because without a proper change management process, everything's going to go belly up. Everything's going to fall apart. Your data center is going to burn down. Your business is going to fail. You've got to be exceptional at change management. So in this episode, we're going to go into the definition of change management and a high-level overview of the 10 aspects of change management. We will be doing subsequent videos on some of those individual parts in subsequent episodes, so make sure to stay tuned. And with that, let's dive right in. Okay, so another Chat GPT definition in less than 100 words. What is change management in ITIL? I think this is a pretty good definition. In the simplest of terms, a change is quite literally that. Anything in IT that changes. That could be technology, that could be software, hardware, it could be processes related to supporting the technology, anything that's a change. Now, it's up to each individual organization to decide what changes merit documentation and the rigors of following the process, whether I'll call it a standard change or a routine change, or a large scale like projects change. All right, and then there's a third category which I didn't see in the definition, but I'll call it an emergency change, right? And so that would be usually, well, always keyed in by an incident, right? And it's up to the individual organization to decide. But if it's a Sev 1 or Sev 2, you need to fix it right now. You're going to change a configuration setting. You're going to revert something. You're essentially making a change, right? And you'll have your own process of approvals. Who authorizes it? Do you need an authorization? Those kinds of questions. And those are personal decisions that every enterprise should be expected to make. With that said, I think this definition covers it pretty well. So we'll go right into the 10 aspects of a change. Okay, so let's get right into it. Going to try to keep this to 5 minutes or less. And so there's 10 of them to go through. All right, change request. That's generally the ticket, right? So you're going to use your tool like ServiceNow, ITSM, BMC Remedy, Salesforce cases, etc., and you're going to keystroke in a change request. That's the actual act of documenting the particular change. Next up, change proposal. This would really be used more in the larger scale project type of context as opposed to like a simple change. But that's the act, whether documented or not, of requesting a particular change. Change advisory board. Their job is a group of people, right, in IT and IT leadership, whose job it is to protect the business, right? What's going on that this change might disrupt? What is going on in the business that might be impacted by this? Do we feel like we can be successful doing this type of change? Candidly, most people treat this, if they do it at all, they tend to treat this as just a rubber stamping session, and I totally disagree with that. It is incumbent upon every participant in the cab to consider the business and whether or not a change is a material risk to the enterprise. Change models. These would be your templates, right? So if you have a stationary, generally if you're using a system like a ServiceNow, the template's built in, right? But underneath of that, in the change description, there would still be templates, right? Step 1, step 2, step 3, introduction to the change, the back out plan, all of those kinds of things. It's going to be very structured. That way it's repeatable, it's consistent, and everybody looking at the change, whether they were involved in that change or not, can evaluate whether or not this is a valid, good, healthy change. Next up, change schedule. That is, when are you going to do it? How long is it going to take, including any potential back out time, right? And we'll get into back out in just a minute. But it's very important, right, to have these dates lined up. And in your change request and your change proposal, when you request a slot, right, you're going to get your approvals, which we'll talk about also in just a second, right, from the business as to when you can do it. And that schedule is derivative of what everybody else decides. All right, next up, change implementation plan, right? And this is one of those areas that requires expertise. It requires a lot of inspection. You've got to know all of the steps, right? The more documentation you have around the change and the individual steps that go into it, the easier it is to pinpoint later how this went wrong, right? And what it does is, the healthier that is, the lower the risk is going to be. So it's very important to have a robust implementation plan. Next up, change authorization. These are your change approvers, right? Whether it's a standard change, some standard changes may have no approvers, right? If it's a big change, then who has to approve that, right? Depending on, I'll call it the classification of the change, right? Its impact to the business, then the level of approvals might go up for your enterprise, right? It might require CIO approval, right? It might require CFO approval depending on the system, and there's all kinds of ways to slice and dice this, and we'll get into that in a later episode. Change records. This would be the collection of change tickets or change requests in a comprehensive body. This is where you will go to look and scan and see what changes have been implemented successfully versus not successfully across the enterprise, or changes with issues. That's another designation, right? And this is all part of, and we'll get into it in a second, your post-implementation reviews, right? How well are these changes going, right? Because again, the worse they go, the worse it is for your enterprise. So obviously, as a part of continuous improvement in IT service management, you want to make sure you're continuing to get better and better and better, right? So back out plan. This is, okay, our change is not going well, something's wrong, this patch isn't working, the server won't reboot, etc. This is the amount of time at the beginning of the change in your change schedule that you allot to undo everything that you did, right? And whether it's the immediate system or software or what have you that you're impacting, if you've impacted negatively something else, then you have to undo it. You have to make it back the way it was before you started messing with it. And then lastly, post-implementation review. This is the one that makes me the most sad because it's the one that gets done the least, right? And this is, again, going back to continuous improvement in IT service management. This is how you get better, right? Looking at the game day footage, right? Understanding the coverages and the schemes that were being run by the opposing football team or your football team, etc. It's the same thing for IT. You've got to go back and look at what went well, what didn't go so well, and what are we going to work on the next time. If you aren't constantly trying to get better and trying to improve, then guess what? Your risk profile is not going to change or even get worse. So with that said, that's change management as part of our IT Quick Bites, IT Concepts in 5 minutes. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and stay tuned. We're going to have some more deep dives into these individual topics because they are so incredibly important. With that, this is DruVision IT Consulting. We'll see you soon.